Okay, West Virginia fans, pull up a chair. This is going to zero in just on you guys. Fireside chat here about what happened. I am not a guy who is typically going to sit here and be a conspiracy guy. There are some people, particularly SEC fans, in the comments of these videos that you will look at, and I'm sure they would tell you that I am some sort of conspiracy theorist. I am not, and I would not tell you that legitimately that's really what's happening. But if you're a West Virginia fan today and you want to say, man, this smells fishy, like this seems fishy, you might have another F word that would precede that. But if you think this seems fishy, like, I get it, man. I get it. So while I'm still not fully endorsing this is some kind of crazy fix, or, it's what was just raised by Nate, an Iowa fan trying to speed up getting Darian DeVries, something like that. I'm not going to legitimately push something like that. But if you want to feel that way right now in this moment, I don't blame you. I don't blame you. If you look at all this, I do not blame how you get to conspiratorial land on this, because it's crazy. It is crazy that West Virginia is not in this field, man. West Virginia had 6 quad one wins, which is more than San Diego State, North Carolina, and Xavier combined. I mentioned the 111 out of 111 brackets thing. If you look at Joe Lunardi, who's usually connected, and like as a K-State fan, I can vividly remember. This is all the way back to Bob Huggins' year, West Virginia fans. Speaking of Bob Huggins' year in Manhattan, K-State went from being in the field to out like an hour before the selection show, something like that. He can get tipped off on things, and stuff changes very quickly. I think it was Arkansas that year who made a big jump and got in and had me all mad. Even Lunardi had them in last 4 buys, not even on the real edge of the bubble. I brought up the great non-con neutral wins that they have. Gonzaga is an 8 seed, Arizona is a 4 seed. But even with that, like Gonzaga as an 8, the analytics love them. I believe Gonzaga top 10 Ken Palm. Thought maybe I saw that today. I mean, the analytics love them. I think Gonzaga is even better, really, than what they have there as an 8 seed. That's a pretty dangerous 8. And West Virginia won at Kansas and beat Iowa State without Tucker DeVries, which is important here, okay? That's going to become very important in a second, because I know out of all the things about today that's been just maddening West Virginia fans, the Tucker DeVries part of it is about as bad as it gets in this whole issue. But let's talk about North Carolina. We saw from the committee, UNC was the last team in the field. West Virginia is the first team left out. Okay. It's very, very, very peculiar. And this is where I start getting into, if you want to say, John, this seems like the fix is in, I will give you permission to explore that thought in your head, because the committee did not value the ACC. It was not like the committee was like, man, everybody's been dumping on the ACC all year, but we actually think it's a pretty good conference. It's not the case. They only had 3 other teams besides North Carolina in, and Louisville went 18-2 in the conference. Okay. 18-2, and they were an 8 seed. Louisville was an 8 seed with an 18-2 conference record. And I know, like, the non-conference was, they had 5 losses, I believe, in their non-con, but I think the feeling was Louisville would be higher than that. So they dock Louisville, I guess, with like an ACC tax, ACC tariff, if you will, and they're an 8 seed, but yet North Carolina gets this extra little bump into the field because of what? Again, 1-12 in quad one games. They were close to beating Duke in the conference tournament. They had the craziest loss that you will probably ever see, or that you saw this weekend, rather, in conference tournaments. Ever is a little bit strong, but that lane violation thing was wild. But they lost the game. They didn't beat Duke. They didn't get that. And yet they still get in. And guess what else? Their athletic director is the chair of the selection committee. So I'm building this case here. Hey, nobody really likes the ACC on the committee, seemingly, the way that they treated some of the other teams in there. And now we come down to this little itty-bitty fact. The chair of the selection committee is Bubba Cunningham, the athletic director at North Carolina. And I know, yes, I know the rule is, John, he's got to recuse himself, go into another room every time they talk about North Carolina, can't be in there when they're talking about your team. I know that's the deal, and I look, I believe them when they say that happens, obviously. Okay. They also brought the vice chair of the selection committee on to the selection show to do that interview. And they say that, and I'm not going so far as to say, oh, they're lying and he's just sitting there right in everyone's ear. But, Fran Fraschilla, of all people, was really pounding this point home. Like, if you're around the guy the whole time you're making your choices here and he goes away for just a little bit, it's like a natural inclination, a natural bias to perhaps lean that way. You don't want to disappoint your friend, your buddy who's in the room. You feel maybe a little bit of extra loyalty to him, even if it's like subconscious. I think about it sort of like, when you think about officiating, tending to skew toward the home team, the home team gets a good whistle. Some of that can be subconscious. Like, in the back of your mind, if you're about to make this big call and it's going to be against the home team, you might have 16,000 people screaming at you and ready to come down and physically harm you, right? And that can be subconsciously something that affects you, even if you're trying as hard as you can consciously to not let it. I think it could be the same type of thing at play here with Cunningham being on the committee. I thought it was a very interesting point made by Fran Fraschilla. But I'm not done there, okay? West Virginia fans, this keeps going. And I'm sorry if this is just more painful, but I hope it's a little bit more cathartic to hear me outline all this. Not only is Bubba Cunningham the committee chair, but then the vice committee chair gets asked the question basically like, okay, why the hell did you guys let North Carolina in? And after he gave his response, I was floored to hear those who asked the question be like, man, well, that is great. I mean, they really went out of their way to be like, wow, that's great. Thanks for laying that all out for us. That's awesome. Well, they didn't give an answer as to like the actual justification for why North Carolina got in. All that we got from the vice committee chair, and I rewound it 2 times to be like, there was nothing there, right? All he did was say, hey, we had this plan, okay? And if UAB beat Memphis, then North Carolina was going to be the last team out. But Memphis won, so there wasn't a bid stealer. So then we went ahead and just put North Carolina in the field. There was no explanation as to the why. The question was not how close was North Carolina to being out. The question was not, was there a bid stealer there? No, the question was, why are they in over West Virginia? Or maybe Indiana too, who I think, has a fairly legitimate beef. They dodged the question, and Bubba Cunningham is sitting right there. The optics of that. They're like dodging the question here on why North Carolina actually makes it in. Well, North Carolina's athletic director, who is the committee chair, is sitting right there. All right, then finally, the last straw here, final nail in the coffin. Bubba Cunningham then gets asked about West Virginia, and he brings up Tucker DeVries' injury. Okay, which if you are just a really casual, you haven't watched much Big 12 basketball, you might say, oh, wow, okay, I hadn't thought of that. I guess they've got a big player, really key player injured. That's where you have to know the details on this, people. Okay, even if you're going to say, hey, we'll use injuries and let it play a factor, and like Florida State fans know about that with Jordan Travis in the college football playoff. But Tucker DeVries has not played since November. He played 8 games, and that's it. Like, West Virginia has pretty much been the team without Tucker DeVries the entire year. They got the 2 big non-conference wins over Gonzaga and Arizona with him, but since then, they went 10-10 in the Big 12. They beat Iowa State without him. They won at Kansas without him. And what are we doing here? Using that as justification. And that, out of everything we've just outlined here, I think that is what would just drive me absolutely up a wall insane if I were a West Virginia fan more than anything. We cannot be using that as legitimate justification here when this team has had to play since December, January, February. We're 3.5 months past when they lost Tucker DeVries for the season. Like, come on, man. That's such a lame excuse. That feels to me like an excuse to try to figure out, backward engineer your way into how West Virginia doesn't get in this field. That never crossed my mind. Like, that's the crazy thing. When he said it, I was like, God, I had not even thought about that. I had not thought about DeVries for a very long time. Crazy, man. West Virginia fans, I'm sorry. I'm getting worked up for you. It's obviously not good for the league. It's not good for the Big 12. So I'm frustrated on your behalf anyway. But you've got every right. If you want to be a little conspiratorial, I don't blame you.